Chernobyl, a place that, for many, evokes images of desolation and disaster. A place where life, as we know it, was halted by a nuclear catastrophe. However, there are stories that challenge this grim narrative, stories of people who, despite everything, have chosen to stay. The Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, an area that was evacuated in 1986 after the explosion of reactor number 4 at the nuclear power plant, became one of the most contaminated and dangerous places on the planet. Radiation is still present, life seems impossible, but some people have returned to this place to continue their lives. In this video, we will explore the lives of those who have made the exclusion zone their home, despite the mortal risks involved in living there. How is it possible that some people remain in such a hostile environment, while the rest of the world keeps a safe distance? Through stories of survival, resilience, and a deep connection to the land, we will discover what it really means to live in one of the most dangerous places in the world. As we travel through the devastated landscapes of Chernobyl, we will meet the samosely, the brave elderly who returned to their homes after the evacuation. We will also meet the scientists and workers who monitor the area and study its effects. But above all, we will explore the human power of adaptation and resilience in an environment that seems to defy all logic. This is a journey to understand how, even in the most extreme circumstances, humans can find a way to survive, resist, and, in many cases, thrive. But before diving into the stories of those who chose to stay, we need to understand how we got to this point. What caused the mass evacuation of the area, and why is it still an exclusion zone today? To answer this question, we must go back to the moment of the nuclear disaster. The Chernobyl disaster occurred on April 26, 1986, when reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, located in Ukraine, exploded in a tragic accident during a safety test. The explosion released a massive amount of radioactivity into the atmosphere, affecting millions of people across Europe and leaving an indelible mark on the history of humanity. Immediately after the accident, Soviet authorities evacuated over 100,000 people living in nearby cities and established a 30-kilometer exclusion zone around the plant. The radiation, which still persists at dangerous levels, made any attempt to live there unthinkable. Despite the warnings and widespread fear of the effects of radiation, the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone continues to exist as a restricted area, monitored by scientists, military personnel, and radiation experts. While the Ukrainian government eventually allowed tourists to access areas closer to the plant, the danger remains real. Hundreds of workers and scientists continue to visit the area to conduct research and assess the long-term effects of radiation on the flora, fauna, and the environment in general. The radioactivity of Chernobyl remains a central topic in scientific research, as the effects of long-term exposure are still not fully understood. The level of radioactivity is high enough for authorities to recommend not living permanently in the zone. The presence of radioactive materials such as cesium-137, strontium-90, and plutonium continues to affect both the soil and the water. For this reason, the exclusion zone remains one of the most dangerous areas on the planet. However, despite the warning of dangers, a small but brave number of people have decided to return. Why have they come back? What drives them to return to a place where life should be impossible? Let's meet the samosely, the elderly who returned to Chernobyl despite the deadly radiation. Despite the mass evacuations and government warnings, some people could not leave their homes in the exclusion zone. The so-called samosely are mainly elderly individuals who, for various reasons, decided to return to the cities and towns they left behind in 1986. The term samosely comes from the Russian word meaning those who stayed. These brave residents are a testament to a unique human resilience, as, despite the high radiation doses, they have found a way to survive and live in an almost entirely deserted environment. Many of the samosely are elderly people who, after the evacuation, decided to return to their homes, driven by a deep love for the land and attachment to their roots. For them, life in the city or in refugee camps was unbearable. They preferred to face the radiation and the dangers of the area rather than live away from their homes, memories, and land. Over the years, these individuals have developed a simple, self-sufficient life based primarily on agriculture. Living in Chernobyl is not easy, especially for those who choose to return. The land remains contaminated, and the health risks are high. However, the samosely have adapted in a surprising way. They grow their own food, raise animals, and in many cases, have found ways to cope with the daily challenges of life in such a contaminated place. Most of them rely on the small gardens and plots they have cultivated over time, growing potatoes, tomatoes, carrots, and other vegetables that manage to survive the contaminated soil. In addition to agriculture, the samosely also practice self-sufficiency, using what nature offers them. Fishing in the nearby lakes, for example, is an important source of food. Although radiation remains a constant threat, many of the residents in the area claim that life in Chernobyl, though difficult, provides them with a certain peace that they could not find elsewhere. Over the years, they have formed small communities where they help each other, sharing resources and life experiences. One of the most representative examples of the samosely lifestyle is the case of a woman known as the babushka of Chernobyl, who has lived in the zone since the disaster. She and others like her have formed a kind of sisterhood, united by their love for their homeland. In some documentaries, such as the babushkas of Chernobyl, we can see how these people, despite medical warnings and the risks they face, continue living in a place where life seems almost impossible. Despite the dangers, some of the samosely show incredible resilience. The connection to their homes and the life they built before the disaster seems stronger than the fear of radiation. It is an act of defiance, but also of love for what once was their life. Many of these individuals have learned to live with the bare minimum, developing impressive resilience in the face of such a hostile environment. But not all those in the exclusion zone are there by their own choice. While the samosely find ways to survive and adapt to life in Chernobyl, there are others who play a fundamental role in the safety and monitoring of the area. These are the workers and scientists who, day after day, face the risks to study the area and keep it under control. How do they face the challenges of radiation, and what do they do to monitor such a dangerous place? Let's meet the workers and scientists of Chernobyl. Although life in Chernobyl seems to have stopped for many, the reality is that the area remains an active, albeit extremely dangerous, place. Over the years, a group of brave scientists, technicians, and workers have remained in the exclusion zone to monitor the effects of radiation and study the long-term consequences of the nuclear disaster. These professionals, committed to research and safety, play an essential role in understanding the persistent dangers and preventing further environmental deterioration. The scientists in Chernobyl are primarily focused on studying how radiation affects the environment, fauna, and flora. Despite safety measures, exposure to high levels of radioactivity remains a constant risk. However, these researchers conduct crucial studies that may help prevent future disasters and understand the effects of radioactivity on ecosystems. The effects of radiation on human health are also a primary concern, so doctors and radiologists closely monitor those working in the area, including the scientists, to ensure they are not exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. The workers who live and work in the exclusion zone play a key role in maintaining safety. They are often referred to as liquidators, a term used to describe those who participated in the cleanup and containment efforts after the disaster. Some of these workers are still present, ensuring that containment structures, such as the sarcophagus covering the damaged reactor, remain in safe condition. Others are responsible for collecting soil, air, and water samples to study the spread of radioactivity. The construction of a new sarcophagus, safer than the original, was one of the most significant achievements in efforts to contain radiation in Chernobyl. This project, which culminated in 2016 with the completion of a massive steel shell known as the new safe confinement, was made possible through the work of tens of thousands of professionals, both on-site and off. While the structure has improved safety conditions in the area, the work of scientists and workers remains essential, as radioactivity will continue to persist for thousands of years. In addition to science and monitoring, some workers in Chernobyl are also involved in tourism, as the zone has started attracting visitors. However, tourism in Chernobyl remains a controversial subject. Many scientists and activists argue that while tourist areas are relatively safe, the disaster should not be trivialized, nor should people be exposed to unnecessary risks. Still, tourism has provided a new perspective on life in the exclusion zone, showing both the unsettling beauty of the place and the risks that still exist. While scientists and workers are responsible for research and monitoring, there is another fascinating aspect of life in Chernobyl that we cannot overlook: the human stories of adaptation. The people who have managed to live in this hostile environment, find ways to survive, and maintain hope, offer us a powerful insight into human resilience. Let's explore how some people adapt to life in Chernobyl and find strength in adversity. Living in Chernobyl is not simply a matter of physical survival, but also of psychological and emotional adaptation to an environment that challenges the most fundamental expectations of human life. Amidst the desolation, some individuals have found ways to rebuild their lives, adapt to the radiation, and learn to live in a place that, for the rest of the world, remains synonymous with disaster and abandonment. The stories of the samosely are only one part of the picture. In addition to them, there are workers, former residents, and others who, for various reasons, have been drawn into life in the exclusion zone. In many cases, the people who have chosen to return or live near Chernobyl share a deep emotional connection to the land, whether through family ties, memories, or a sense of belonging that prevents them from leaving their homes. Adapting to such a hostile environment requires extraordinary mental resilience. The residents must face the constant uncertainty about their health, as the long-term effects of radiation remain uncertain. However, many have become accustomed to living with this ongoing concern, managing their expectations and accepting that, in many cases, life is what they make of it. Some of the samosely adapt by creating small rituals and routines that give meaning and purpose to their daily lives. Cultivating a garden, tending to animals, or simply walking through the fields becomes a way of reaffirming their humanity in a place where nature seems to challenge them. These everyday acts become symbols of resistance, something larger than mere survival. It is the affirmation of life amid adversity. The simple act of being on the land, cultivating it, and working it gives them a sense of control in a place where the unpredictable seems to be the norm. The resilience of those who remain in the zone is also reflected in how they relate to others. People in Chernobyl tend to form small but close-knit communities, where mutual cooperation becomes the key to survival. Life in such an extreme environment forces people to help each other, share what they have, and protect one another. This solidarity and sense of community stand out as fundamental factors in the adaptation of the residents. For many, it is a way of not feeling completely isolated, of finding comfort in the company of others despite the circumstances. Despite the challenges, the samosely and others living in the exclusion zone have also found beauty in nature. In an environment where vegetation and animals seem to have reclaimed the land abandoned by humans, the residents feel at peace with the land that was once theirs. For many, returning to nature is not only a matter of survival but also of finding a deep sense of connection with the world around them. The sight of trees growing in the remains of buildings or animals moving through the abandoned fields creates a contrast between human devastation and the resilience of nature, and many residents see it as a reminder that even in the most damaged places, life finds a way to thrive. In these stories of adaptation and resilience, we also find a recurring theme: attachment to roots. For many of these people, their home is not just a physical structure but a symbol of identity and belonging. Returning to Chernobyl is not just about survival but a way of resisting the loss of their history, traditions, and way of life. In many ways, returning to the zone is a declaration that, despite everything, life goes on, history continues, and human roots can find a way to flourish even in the most inhospitable places. But the stories of those who have decided to stay not only show the human capacity to endure, but also the complex relationship between man and place. For some, Chernobyl is a place of rebirth, while for others, it remains a symbol of tragedy. Over the years, the presence of tourists has added a new layer to this narrative. What do tourists who visit the zone think about the life that persists there? And how do the stories of adaptation and resilience intertwine with the grim tourism in Chernobyl? Since the exclusion zone was open to tourists in the 1990s, Chernobyl has started to attract thousands of visitors each year, curious to explore one of the world's most notorious sites. This phenomenon, known as dark tourism, has grown into a thriving industry, with tourists arriving from all over the world to witness the remnants of the nuclear disaster, walk through the ruins of abandoned cities, and learn more about the history of the tragedy. However, this contrast between the tourist attraction and the lives of those who still inhabit the zone creates a palpable tension. Is it ethical to visit a place where human life has been almost eradicated while some people continue to struggle to survive in its surroundings? Tourism in Chernobyl is partly a reminder of humanity's fascination with the macabre and the unknown. Many travelers view the zone as a time capsule, a vestige of a tragic past that has been frozen in time, as though it were a movie set. Tourists often visit iconic places like the city of Pripyat, the abandoned school, or the famous Ferris wheel, seeking that sense of exploration amid the desolation. However, this superficial view of the place does not always take into account the complex reality of those who have decided to stay. For the samosely, tourism in the area can be a source of discomfort. Despite efforts by authorities to restrict access to the most dangerous zones, the presence of tourists in nearby cities and villages can be perceived as an invasion of their privacy and way of life. Many of these residents feel that their history, suffering, and struggle for survival have been turned into a spectacle for others' entertainment. While some tourists show respect and fascination with the stories of those who remain in Chernobyl, others may see the tragedy as a morbid curiosity, without fully understanding the human suffering behind the ruins. Despite this, some of the workers and scientists monitoring the zone also see tourism as an opportunity to educate and raise awareness about the long-term effects of radiation and the importance of historical memory. Tour guides, many of whom are former employees of the plant or residents of nearby areas, provide narratives that help visitors better understand the magnitude of the tragedy, as well as the stories of adaptation and resilience from the few who still remain. In this way, tourism, though controversial, also has an educational aspect that can help keep the memory of the disaster alive and highlight the importance of future prevention. However, tourism in Chernobyl is not without risks. Although the most contaminated areas are restricted, radiation exposure remains a concern. Authorities have implemented strict regulations to minimize the risks, but tourists must follow rigorous safety guidelines to avoid exposure to dangerous levels of radioactivity. Despite these efforts, some critics argue that tourism in Chernobyl trivializes a human tragedy by reducing it to a tourist experience. Tourism in Chernobyl, although fascinating to some, also invites us to reflect on the ethics of exploration and the respect for those who continue to live in the zone. Now, as we conclude this journey through life in Chernobyl, it is important to remember what these stories teach us about the human capacity for adaptation and survival. Chernobyl is not only a place of destruction but also a testament to what it means to resist, overcome pain, and find strength in the darkest moments. What do these stories reveal about human nature? And what can we learn from the resilience of those who continue to live in such a challenging environment? Chernobyl, in its vastness of silence and devastation, has become a profound symbol of the human capacity to endure what seems insurmountable. The tragedy that took place there over 3 decades ago remains an open wound in the history of humanity, but it also presents us with powerful lessons about what it means to be human amidst adversity. Through the stories of the samosely, the workers and scientists, and those who continue to fight for survival in a place marked by death and radioactivity, we understand the enormous adaptability and resilience that humans possess. The resilience we see in Chernobyl is not only about surviving extreme conditions. It is a testament to how humans can find meaning and purpose in the most challenging situations. The return of the samosely to their abandoned homes, despite the constant danger of radiation, is not merely a matter of necessity but a deep attachment to the land, to personal history, and to the memories that have shaped their identity. These individuals have managed, with effort, to adapt to an environment that, for many, is a constant reminder of the fragility of life. For the workers and scientists who monitor the zone, resilience manifests in a different way. Their dedication to study and safety in such a dangerous place demonstrates not only a profound sense of duty but also a commitment to preserving knowledge and historical memory. These professionals not only face the risks of radiation but also take on the responsibility of educating the world about the dangers of nuclear energy and the importance of learning from past mistakes. In their hands rests the hope that the lessons of Chernobyl will not be forgotten, and that through research and monitoring, the damage caused by the disaster can be mitigated. Tourism in Chernobyl, on the other hand, offers an ambiguous view of human resilience. Although many view the tragedy as a morbid curiosity, there are those who, by visiting the zone, confront the reality of destruction and the loss of human lives, learning about the lasting impact of the disaster. By doing so, they contribute to preserving the memory of what happened while reflecting on the lessons the disaster teaches us. However, this tourism also raises questions about respect for those still living in the zone and how to approach Chernobyl's history ethically. As the stories of those who remain in Chernobyl continue to unfold, we face a deeper reflection on what it means to be human in extreme conditions. Life in Chernobyl, though dangerous and heartbreaking, is also a lesson in adaptability, emotional resilience, and the need to find purpose even when everything else seems lost. The people who have returned or who continue to work in the zone not only show us the resilience of the human body but also the strength of the human spirit, a force that persists despite tragedy, clings to hope, and seeks to rebuild what was destroyed. Finally, looking toward the future, it is essential not only to remember what happened in Chernobyl but also to reflect on how we can learn from these stories of resilience. The tragedy not only invites us to remember pain and devastation but also to admire the human capacity to adapt, resist, and move forward. Life continues in Chernobyl, even in a place where it seems that death has taken over everything. And it is in that crack of life, in that continuous act of resistance, where we find the true nature of human resilience. Through the stories of those who have decided to stay, the workers and scientists who continue to fight for the zone's safety, and the tourists who come seeking a somber view of the past, we have witnessed what it means to survive in a place marked by tragedy. Chernobyl, though desolate, remains a reminder of the fragility of human life, but also of the incredible adaptability and resilience that resides within humans. The lesson that this place leaves us with is clear. No matter how devastating the environment, there is always an opportunity to find a way forward. And that is what makes human resilience, even in places as desolate as Chernobyl, so powerful and transcendent. Chernobyl is a place where tragedy and resilience coexist, where the scars of the past remain visible but have not destroyed the human spirit. Amid the devastation, the stories of those who remain, both the samosely and the workers and scientists, offer us an invaluable lesson. The capacity for adaptation, inner strength, and the tenacity to move forward are intrinsic elements of human nature. In an environment where radiation still threatens life, these people have found ways to face the danger, reaffirming their bond with the land, their history, and their identity. The people who live in Chernobyl, just like those who tirelessly work in the area, show us that resilience is not only about surviving external adversities but also about finding meaning and purpose, even in the most desolate places. Their struggle, dedication, and adaptability remind us that, no matter how the environment changes and how overwhelming the challenges may be, we can always find ways to resist and continue, adapting to circumstances while keeping our roots and humanity intact. Tourism, though controversial, offers an opportunity to reflect on the impact of Chernobyl on history and on the people who have chosen to live in its shadows. It invites us to remember, to learn, and, above all, to understand that life goes on, even in the most devastated places. No matter how much time has passed since the tragedy, the story of Chernobyl remains alive, along with the stories of those who have refused to surrender. In the end, the lesson of Chernobyl is clear. Human resilience is not only measured by our ability to survive, but by our ability to find hope and purpose, even when everything seems lost. The legacy of Chernobyl lies not only in the memories of a nuclear tragedy, but also in the stories of those who, despite everything, have found a way to move forward. Although the catastrophe marked a turning point in human history, those who have chosen to stay or return have shown that life can be reborn, even under the most extreme circumstances. In a world where everything seems to have been destroyed, human resilience remains the strongest testament to what we are capable of doing. Chernobyl, with its history full of pain, also leaves us with a message of resistance. The samosely and the workers who monitor the area show us that life, no matter how desolate it may seem, always finds a way to persist. This place, although marked by tragedy, continues to be a reminder that humanity has the ability to adapt, resist, and ultimately survive. Ultimately, the lessons of Chernobyl invite us to reflect on what it means to be human in the face of adversity and how our decisions, our ability to resist and adapt, can leave a lasting mark on history, even in the darkest and most devastated places in the world.